Welcome to the Boxing Source Podcast, where we go over the latest news in boxing and react to all of the fights that happened in the past week. Now, let's go to our host, J.R. Bell.
Hopefully we're live. Hopefully you can hear me. And hopefully you can see me here on this thing. Yeah, it's a little bit of a delay here for this edition of the Boxing Source Podcast, this live podcast. And I'll just say this: Google Chrome is full of garbage right now, full of absolute garbage right now, because that is the reason why this particular podcast, live podcast, started on a delay because of Google Chrome. Absolute BS, absolute BS. But we are here, we are back. All right. We got a lot of things here that we're going to be talking about in this edition of the Boxing Source Podcast here for March 1st, 2026. Yes, there was a lot of action that did take place. You know, we had ProBox TV. We had Manny Pacquiao Promotions that had a fight card. We also had the Matchroom Boxing fight card that was taking place here this weekend. So we're going to be touching on a couple of the things there as far as like what happened on Friday and Saturday, and focus on the main event there on that Matchroom Boxing card there. That was unification bout there for the WBO and IBF titles at 130 pounds. You had Emmanuel Navarrete going up against Eduardo Nunez there in that headliner, man. And the thing about it is that, you know, it was a good matchup on paper. It was a good matchup on paper. A number of people, including myself, looked at one particular fighter and favored one particular fighter in this matchup. Okay, and I thought that this was going to be a good scrap between the two fighters there. You know, Navarrete was going in there as the WBO super featherweight champion, and with Eduardo Nunez going in there as the IBF super featherweight champion. Okay, Navarrete was in there with a record of 39 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. Eduardo Nunez was there with a record of 29-1. Nunez was going in there with a great winning streak, in this thing. While Navarrete, on the flip side, in his past 4 fights, had 1 win, 1 loss, 1 draw, and 1 no contest. Of course, the Charlie Suarez fight ended up being a no contest after it was reversed from being a decision win for Emmanuel Navarrete. But, we hadn't seen Navarrete in the ring since then. For Nunez, he was able to at least get in a bout that was back in September of last year against Christopher Diaz, right? In that one, I thought, he had a good performance. Knocked down Chris Diaz twice in that particular fight. Even back then, after that decision was made, they were pretty much like setting up this bout between Navarrete and Nunez. And, I was feeling like Navarrete, just hadn't been in the ring for some time. So I thought that was going to show here a little bit in this bout that they had for these guys. But for those that saw the bout, man, oh my goodness, it was just absolutely opposite of what I was thinking it was going to be, man. It was absolutely opposite of what I thought it was going to be. I thought that Nunez was going to be able to at least get within range to Emmanuel Navarrete, at least use some movement or something like that early in order to, have Navarrete work, have Navarrete, have to figure out how he could get the distance away or distance from Nunez there in this. But what we saw in the first few rounds, absolute opposite. I didn't understand it there from Nunez. What we saw was Nunez being the shorter fighter, having the shorter reach, basically fight on his back foot, fight going backwards, fight on his back foot, and basically give Emmanuel Navarrete more of the reach advantage. It's one thing for a fighter to have a reach advantage against an opponent, but if that opponent is fighting off of his back foot or fighting going backwards, instead of trying to, get on the inside and, use movement to get on the inside, then you basically just, handed a number of rounds to him offensively. And, well, props to Navarrete. He was able to take advantage of that. He was, very active with his hands in those first few rounds. Like I would say, the first 4 rounds. But particularly in the first 2, you didn't really see Nunez do much offensively. He was just, moving backwards, trying to, figure out if he could shift, move around, move his head or whatever it was, and try to, work in a couple of counter punches from Navarrete. But props to Emmanuel Navarrete because he was sharp in those first couple of rounds, and he was very active with his hands. You know what I mean? So, the thing about it was like, you saw the activity, there with the hands of Navarrete, and he was hurting Nunez early. Like in the second round, as early in this as in the second round, you had Nunez have the welt, under his eye, and the thing about it was once I saw that, I was like, oh man, this ain't gonna be looking good, And for me, I thought Nunez was going to shift things around at least by the second or third round because you already seen that welt that was under his eye, right? But I didn't see Sugar Nunez there kind of like switch things up until about after round 5 or round 6, and then you kind of like seen him be a little bit more successful as far as like getting to the inside one, and then fighting off of his front foot and backing up Navarrete. But here's the thing about it. Navarrete, even though Nunez was trying to have him back up, Navarrete was doing the opposite of Nunez. Hey, okay, I see that you're, trying to come forward, but I'm gonna throw punches. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna still throw punches. So either you're gonna have to dodge them or block them, but I'm gonna, send a message, while you're trying to get on the inside. Now, the thing with Nunez was he was a little bit more successful as far as like going to the body of Navarrete, but that was like by round 6. Okay, like after round 6, man, you pretty much like gave Navarrete a head start of like 6 rounds already. You know what I mean? And props to Navarrete. He was like very, very accurate at times, even though they all say, oh, he's unorthodox, he's quirky, he's weird with his stances, he throws punches at like crazy angles. But hey, at the end of the day, it still gets to the target. And that's the thing about Navarrete. He doesn't care how he throws it, where he throws it, as long as he is able to hit the target. And that's what he was doing there against Eduardo Nunez, man. And, although there may have been like a couple of rounds where Nunez might have had something, it wasn't enough to kind of like build a momentum on Navarrete because that strategy of going to the body, like I said, he was doing it in round 6. He should have been doing it in round 1. Because if you're planning on wearing down your opponent, try to do that early, especially if you know that you're the shorter fighter and you know that someone like Navarrete just has that type of, activity, And the other thing that, was kind of like pointed out here for this fight was, well, it was 2 things. But one was that Navarrete prepared for this fight differently than the other fights that he's had, that he actually had a nutritionist on for this camp against Eduardo Nunez. So, with that, I think, his energy level was kind of a lot different, especially a lot different than the fight against Charlie Suarez, but, maybe against, Robertson and Sesau or, other opponents that he's had in the past, like he prepared differently for this fight against Eduardo Nunez. And that, just made it to where, even though he was getting, hit with a few punches, whether it was upstairs or to the body, he was still responding. And the other thing was he was very sharp with his counter punches to Nunez, right? And then what it was about that 9th round, I was talking about that welt that was under the eye. It was getting really puffed up and everything like that. And then Navarrete just hit a punch, bam, and just busted it wide open. And then after that, you'll see like the commentators there for the zone. You had, Julio Cesar Chavez there, for the Spanish commentary. He was like, oh, man, this is brutal, man. They need to stop the fight. But it ended up going a couple more rounds. until the 11th round or whatever it was. Then the doctor, stepped in, said, you know what? Nah, man, we ain't gonna let you go any further there, Eduardo Nunez. And so they ended up stopping the fight for Emmanuel Navarrete to have this win here by TKO. He is the now WBO and IBF super featherweight champion. They're now with a record of 40 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. Wanted to add in one of our great panelists here to join in on this particular podcast here. We got the Boxing Academic checking in here. What's going on, Boxing Academic?
Not much. How you doing tonight, JR?
Oh, we're doing all good. Just catching up with all the action that's went down this past weekend. Particularly there in Glendale, Arizona. Here, so to speak, with this fight that, thought it was going to be a good scrap, but it ended up being the exact opposite.
Oof. What time did the fight end?
What was it, about like 11, around midnight or something like that?
Oh, it wasn't later than that?
Man, I couldn't like really recall, man, because it was like another fight card that was happening that ended a lot earlier than I thought it was.
Okay.
So, they had like another fight card that was in Verona, New York, and that fight card ended at like 10 p.m. Eastern time, if that, by that time, we didn't even have the co-feature for the Matchroom Boxing card happening yet. So, yeah, it was something there on that front.
I got you. So I asked that because it's going to lead into to the rest of my story here.
Gotcha.
I got one more question before I start talking.
All right.
Was Nunez Navarrete's sparring partner before?
They didn't really mention that, but what they did mention, this was the other thing about it, was that it said that Nunez looked up to Navarrete. And I'm like, huh? Like you're one, if you look up to somebody, I know this isn't like, how some of us talk about, this whole thing with Keyshawn and Shakur and all of that. That's completely separate. That's completely different, right? This is like, if you idolizing somebody, like say, for example, Xander Zayas idolizes Miguel Cotto or Tito Trinidad. That's pretty much like how Eduardo Nunez was looking at Emmanuel Navarrete going into this fight. And I'm like, man, this is the biggest fight of your career. You can't be looking at him like, oh, he's your hero or something like that, man. Like you almost looking like you're intimidated by the dude. And I'm like, no, you can't go into this fight here when this is supposed to be potentially for the number 1 spot at 130 pounds, and you're like in awe of Emmanuel Navarrete. That ain't gonna work.
So the end of the story is that I'm pretty sure I fell asleep on the fight. The fight was not very entertaining to me. Like you said, Nunez fought on the back foot. And I was trying to like stick with it, man. I was trying to stick with it. I really was. And I was like, okay, maybe after round 3, the action to pick up a little bit, give 2 rounds. And like you said, Nunez was in there showing respect.
Yeah.
He fought, to me. The reason why I asked that, because he fought like most sparring partners fight the top guy. He fought like in a different kind of way. He fought like Mario Barrios, in that he just accepted his fate. Didn't maybe something else happened when I went to sleep. Maybe you can tell me something different happened when I went to sleep. But
I'll put it this way, like how you would like described it, right? So you're going through the first couple of rounds and you're seeing like, oh, well, Nunez ain't doing much, and Navarrete is, just starting to do his thing. Round 3, you're like, damn, this is about the same thing. So you're like saying, man, if I don't see Nunez do something at round 4, man, this fight is pretty much over. And
no, I just fell asleep in the middle. The phone was, I was in the bed and I was watching the phone, and then next thing I know, like I woke up again at maybe like 3 o'clock or something. And I'm like, dang, what happened in the fight? I was like, what happened?
Yeah. So man. Yeah. I mean, I just did not expect, Eduardo Nunez to get cooked like that. Man, he got cooked. This was probably one of the better performances that Navarrete has had in his career, recent times, outside of, cooking Oscar Valdez in a rematch that was like an absolute beatdown, you know what I mean? But, outside of that, I kind of like had it to the point where I expected more from Nunez in this, especially early in this bout, because you had like a couple of times where they did have some good exchanges, but that didn't happen until like round 7 and round 8. Like you could have had this in like rounds 2 and 3, and a live crowd there was expecting that. You know what I'm saying? I think there was like even at one point where it was between either rounds 2 and round 4 where they might have had a scrap out in the crowd. It might have been a fight in the crowd because you seen like a lot of the people that were in the front 3 rows kind of like looking back or something like that, like there was a fight going on. So it was like, so the attention was basically, outside of the ring for those first 3 rounds because Nunez didn't really do that much. And for Navarrete, it was more of him being, efficient or economical before like, turning up the heat in the later rounds, but I just feel like I had Nunez to do a little bit more here in this bout, and he just didn't, show that, with one bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much stock I can put in Navarrete given Nunez's performance. And again, a lot of I admit this ain't the division I just be watching all the time. Well, if you say 130, I guess I do watch that sometimes. But for me not having seen him before, at least not recalling to have seen him, this don't make me like think very highly of him. Not that he's not a professional fighter and don't deserve all the accolades that he get, but just from that performance, he looked like a sparring partner.
Yeah, and the thing about it was with Nunez, he was able to have the IBF super featherweight title, but at least he won it, but it was like vacant. When he won it, like he defeated Masanori Rikishi, for the vacant super featherweight title, and then as I mentioned before, with his defense against Christopher Diaz, that was last September, but. After like one defense of that IBF belt, he's getting in there against someone like a Emmanuel Navarrete, who has been a multi-division world champion, had an attempt to win a world title at lightweight, but, fell short there against Dennis Berincic, and then just went back down to 130 and, had the bout against Charlie Suarez, and then this one. So, it was like up and down for the past few fights for Emmanuel Navarrete. But, at the same time, like for him to have this type of performance here against Eduardo Nunez, it says like, hey, he's like right back in the mix. Now, I had him kind of like mentioned around the bottom part of the Boxing Source pound for pound top 16, right? But, with this performance, that kind of like makes him, be under consideration for the top 10.
Oh, Navarrete?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't know. It's hard to judge somebody because, like, is Ryan the truth just because he beat Mario Barrios?
No.
A lot of people, I don't know who it was, but somebody was like, his body looked awfully familiar to how it looked in that first
Haney fight.
I saw non-boxing people say that to me. It was like he looked different.
Yeah, he said he looked different, man. Hey, I don't know what camp he was going through there, with his father or whatever it was, but hey, it was enough for him to coast to a victory against Mario Barrios last weekend there. But shout out to Secret Dance Move. Yes, I did. Pick Eduardo Nunez there. Man, I ain't really do it all too hot, man. The previous week I picked Mario Barrios, and then this one I picked Eduardo Nunez. Man, this ain't good, man. This is not a good streak. It's not a good streak. It says now we're in the top 10 pound for pound. Hey, given what's happening or what's not happening with a lot of fighters, yeah, it's under consideration. I'll just say that it's under consideration.
Who's the alternatives like that can challenge him? What's the top guys that could challenge him?
All right, so he's able to be the unified champion there at 130 pounds with the WBO and IBF super featherweight titles. The WBC super featherweight champion is Usyk Foster. When he was, there in attendance there for, this bout, he had been seeking the fight with Emmanuel Navarrete ever since he had signed with Top Rank. But once he signed with Top Rank, he had, close bouts. He had the loss to Robeson Conceição. He had the rematch with Robeson Conceição. So it never really materialized, in time before, you had the whole thing going on with Top Rank and the network deal. So you do have that. And then you're supposed to have the WBA champion, Jaza Dickens, going up against Anthony Kakachi here pretty soon. And Jaza Dickens might end up losing that fight. I don't know. But yeah, Usyk Foster looks like, he could be, the one that should be next in line. But he was in the whole little back and forth verbal war with Ray Ford out there in Arizona, man. And Ray Ford's, currently they're at number 2 in the WBC. But hey, it just depends on, what the whole situation is, I say, with Top Rank, because if Top Rank would have had a solid network deal, we probably would have had Navarrete versus Usyk Foster already. We probably would have had that instead of having Foster fighting Stephen Fulton last year. So we'll have to see how that would kind of materialize. But Foster versus Ford would be a good matchup. It's just that will there be an update in reference to Top Rank and them getting close to a network deal, which was kind of like reported or hinted at by Brunch Boxing there with the article that's on their website that it could be closer to a deal, potentially with ESPN again, but it just remains to be seen if that's going to actually happen there. But that's kind of like the current situation there at 130 pounds with Emmanuel Navarrete having those 2 belts. Usyk Foster, of course, having that performance against Stephen Fulton on December, and Jaza Dickens having a WBA title. That's about to defend against Kakachi there.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. I mean, definitely the Usyk Foster fight should. I mean, I think I probably would agree with Secret Dance Move, his last comment.
Yeah, you got that there. Got the top 3 at Usyk Foster, Emmanuel Navarrete, and Anthony Kakachi. So,
well, the other one before that, what he said when you said top 10.
Oh yeah, top 10. Well, hey, yeah, okay, runner Usyk versus Navarrete. Sure, I'd say top 10 pound for pound, but not from this fight. Hey, I mean, I feel you. I understand you on that. It's just there's a lot of inactivity from fighters that are, considered around the top 10 pound for pound. You got one particular fighter that's up near the top of the pound for pound list that's going to be fighting a kickboxer, man, which will be mentioned here a little bit later. So it's I don't know what a number of these fighters are, doing or what their direction is, but it seems like a lot of them are either having those so to speak one-offs, or they ended up fighting in different divisions or having different fights in different divisions and not either establishing themselves in one division or continuously fighting top guys within a particular division. And it just makes it, a complete mess on that front. You know what I mean? So, that's how I kind of see it there. But, for, Navarrete to, score this stoppage win over Nunez, man, that just, gives him a few points there, particularly in the super featherweight division. But yeah, you could have Usyk Foster there currently at number 1. I wouldn't, mind that, one bit, on that front. I mean, you did have that as the main event there in Arizona. They did have Emiliano Vargas versus Augustine Quintana in the co-feature bout. That was kind of made the co-feature the day before it happened because it was supposed to be Tamir Smalls versus Abel Ramos, which I'll get into a little bit later. But Emiliano Vargas getting that stoppage win over Augustine Quintana in a good fight for Emiliano Vargas. I thought it was a really good opponent there for him. For him to kind of like work on a few things offensively and defensively. He was there on the offensive standpoint. Defensively, there's still a few things that he has to work on. Of course, he does have his father there as his head trainer there. Of course, the great Fernando Vargas. And what was it? I saw him in, September when he had the fights there at, I think, it wasn't like September. It was back in July was when I saw him at the Madison Square Garden Theater. But that was only like a 1-round knockout win for him on that. So, he's kind of like climbing up the rankings there at 140. But this one here against Quintana kind of like says that, all right, he's, rising in popularity, of course, having or being the son of Fernando Vargas there. But, some people have to pump their brakes as far as like him being a contender of sorts there at 140 pounds. So I think this particular fight kind of like showed that, he still has a few things that he has to work on here so far. So were you able to catch, Vargas there in action?
Yeah, I mean, it was a much better fight than the final one. I don't think that. I think they should have gave him they should have given him the due diligence to allow him to go all rounds.
No, yeah.
They shouldn't have stopped the fight.
Yeah.
And like to me, it felt like one of those stoppages that this is the top guy. This is the guy that matters more for the sport of boxing. So let's just go and end it. So nothing crazy can even potentially possibly happen in this 12th round, which it probably wouldn't have. Yeah. But I mean, get a man an opportunity. I mean, he was getting beat up a little bit, but I mean, he also still was punching.
Yeah, he was still game, throughout the whole joint. He was still fighting. It wasn't, like you said, it wasn't as bad as the main event, but for Quintana, he was, competitive, particularly like in the second half of the fight, so I say, why not go ahead and, give him the opportunity to, go out there, as they say, on his shield or whatever it was. So for that referee to kind of like do that, that was like a bad look there from Raul Caiz Jr. for him to go in the corner and wave off the bout there, like the fighter wasn't saying that he wanted it stopped. The corner wasn't saying anything about that. So why would you, want to leave it to yourself in order to do that? Like you didn't even, like say, for example, he didn't even bring in the doctor to check in on a Quintana, to see something happening. And we just ended up, taking matters into his own hands and, stopped about there. Shout out to BVO Sports TV in the building here, joining in on the live chat and whatnot here, y'all. But yeah, that was a good battle there, and you had the Tamir Smalls versus Abel Ramos bout on this card there, with the veteran Abel Ramos. It was something where you had a good start by Tamir Smalls, but Abel Ramos, of course, being a veteran, was like really, really close to being the WBC welterweight champion in 2024. But ended up having to draw with Mario Barrios at AT&T Stadium, right? But he was able to outpoint Tamir Smalls and outwork him, especially in the second half of the fight, for him to get a decision victory. It was like, two judges that gave Ramos the majority of the rounds there, like 7 rounds or 8 rounds in favor of Abel Ramos, while Tamir Smalls got, the benefit of 6 rounds there in his favor for this particular fight. But, I just felt like it was something where Tamir Smalls probably just was matched up against the fighter that they shouldn't have matched him up with at this point of his career. With his 17th pro fight, they're in the welterweight division against a world title challenger. That's a big ask. You know what I mean? So I think that's, what ended up happening here is that, experience prevailed on this, and Tamir Smalls, has a setback of sorts there on that front. I don't know what it's going to mean for Smalls here in the near future. I think that we had something where we had Matchroom, I guess they're matchmakers, uh, you know, have a little bit of issues, or they've kind of run into a few things here and there when it comes to either guys that are mid card or co-feature or in their main events here, particularly in these last few weeks or last couple of months. So we'll have to see how that goes on there too. No comment. No comment on that one. But for Ramos, this kind of keeps them out there in the welterweight division. And I like to see what they would do with Abel Ramos here at this point, because it's like if you have him, kind of like out there that could either be like a contender there at welterweight, or if you still had like for example, if you had an up and comer there for the welterweight division that has a little bit more experience than a Tamir Smalls, then yeah, you can match him up against the Abel Ramos and then see what he does. Or if they can just have Abel Ramos be back in the mix in the welterweight division, because most recently they put Abel Ramos there at number 9 in the WBA. Like, I don't know if there was like some type of WBA, might have been like a Continental America's title on the line for this, but outside of that, I just feel like Ramos was able to get back into the mix there at welterweight, with this win that he has. Yeah, Continental North America's title is what they have him at. So that's going to be something there with him getting this win. Academic, you were able to see something there with that fight?
No, I don't think I caught this one.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, because that one was a really interesting bout. Like I said, it was for Smalls, he was kind of like establishing the jab and kind of like having try to get the distance away from Abel Ramos, but then his endurance level was I would say in question there in the back half of the fight. He says Matchroom doesn't seem how to develop black fighters. Well, I could say that about all other particular promotional bodies there. It says Matchroom picked wrong fights for Jalil Hackett and Khalil Cole. Some people thought that Hackett's matchup that he had, when he was on the Boots card sometime back, that he shouldn't have had the matchup there against Pete Dobson. They were not, in favor of that fight against Pete Dobson, but he was able to, get through that bout and get a decision. But then you had the whole thing with Jose Roman, the one that was supposed to be the first one back in December of 2024, where he ended up losing by split decision. And then, the other thing was he was supposed to have the rematch in March of 2025, but then, ended up having an injury of sorts. And then after that, that was pretty much, it for Jalil Hackett and Matchroom. And now you see that Jalil Hackett was on there for Zuffa Boxing. So, that kind of like, how that works. And, with the Khalil Cole thing, he was on, one of those cards as well and for Matchroom, and ended up losing, by knockout, got the win in a rematch. And, now you see what happened with Khalil Cole there in his last bout, where some people thought that he lost that one. You know what I mean? So I don't know, like, what's going on with Matchroom. It looks like, the matchmaker ain't really hitting. It ain't really hitting on a number of those fights, but we kind of like have that history there with Matchroom, and a lot of their, I guess their feature fighters or whatever it is. Sometimes they end up matching them up badly against, like, say, for example, against Mexican fighters or whatever it is, man. And they still end up on the short end. But, given those, 3 bouts that I mentioned, in 2 of them, right, 2 of the bouts on that card involved fighters that were under top rank. Emmanuel Navarrete and Emiliano Vargas, and both of them were, able to, be successful in their bouts. So you had that. And then if y'all remember the last matchroom card that they had at the Fontainebleau in Las Vegas, that was supposed to be, the IBF title fight with Andy Cruz and Ray Murataya. Andy Cruz ended up falling short to Ray Murataya, and Murataya is the top ranked fighter. So top rank, hey, they kind of looking good here. It's just that they don't have a fight card that they are able to have their guys be featured on. And so we got to look to see what happens here, I guess, at the end of the month, because we're going to have another top ranked fighter in Richard Torres Jr. going up against Frank Sanchez on that fight card featuring Sebastian Fundora versus Keith Thurman there. Yeah, it says Secret Dance Move on the live chat said, yeah, he definitely lost against Jesse Hart. Yeah. GHB was very angry about it. Yeah, he was angry about it because, Cole wasn't really doing much at all, man. And he was like fouling. He almost like body slammed Jesse Hart in that fight and stuff like that. And, the judges ended up giving the decision to Khalil Cole. It was crazy work for that one. You know what I mean? But that's what ended up happening on that scene. But yeah, for this matchroom card, having Navarrete had the performance that he had there, in against Eduardo Nunez, and then for Tamir Smalls to have his first loss of his professional career there against Abel Ramos, that was a definite setback there for matchroom boxing. So I'd like to see what they could do here, at least in the near future, because yeah, they ain't looking real hot here in 2026 or to start off 2026. And y'all remember that they ended up getting swept in that Queensbury matchroom 5v5 a couple of years back too. Yeah, it ain't looking all too hot there for matchroom on that front, right? So was able to talk about that. I did mention the thing there with O'Shaquie Foster and Raymond Ford. Like I said, it would be a good matchup. But I'm still waiting to see if Top Rank could have something where they could set up O'Shaquie Foster versus Emmanuel Navarrete for a unification there of the WBC, WBO, and IBF titles. You know what I mean? So we got to see how that goes. Shout out to Jesus Sam in the building, checking in here on the live conversation. Yeah. He says Navarrete versus Espinoza. Man, I've been asking for Emmanuel Navarrete versus Rafael Espinoza ever since probably 2024, early 2024, something like that. When both of them, you had Espinoza, of course, having his wins over Robeisy Ramirez at the time to, become a world champion there at 126. And then when Navarrete was, was cooking at 130 before attempting to, fight for the 135-pound title. So I've been calling for that fight. Now, hey, if they have Navarrete versus Espinoza instead of Navarrete versus O'Shaquie Foster, I wouldn't mind it. Something where I probably wouldn't be surprised if that would happen through Top Rank, but I just don't think that Espinoza will, go ahead and make that decision to move up to 130 as of yet. I feel like Espinoza should get in there with Bruce Carrington in the unification at 126. Hey, we finally have a unification at 130 after some time since Shakur Stevenson here with Navarrete beating Nunez. Let's go ahead and have a unification at 126, because when have we ever had a unification at 126? I can't even remember when we had a unification about a 126. That's crazy. You know what I mean? So I'd rather see, Espinoza, they're doing work at 126, going up against who is now the WBC champion there in Bruce Carrington. So let's see if that, goes ahead and happens on this front. One other thing here, one of the, kind of like talk about here was this thing in reference to somebody that was in attendance there for those fights. With Eddie Hearn and all those other folks, is the WBO welterweight champion there, Devin Miles Haney. And they did talk with Devin Haney there during that whole thing. And he, of course, saw what happened last week. Ryan Garcia winning the WBC welterweight championship. And of course, after that happened, folks, fight fans were calling for a potential rematch between Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia. So, Devin Haney has been very vocal on this and saying that, hey, he wants that rematch there with Ryan Garcia. Now, thing is, will we get that next? We should get that next. This should be like the most lucrative fight that should be out there within the welterweight division. Well, in the welterweight division by far, but it'd probably be one of the most lucrative bouts out there in boxing that we could have in 2026. Now, I know that there's been a whole lot of back and forth talk with Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, Bill Haney. They brought up something there where like a sibling, or is it Devin Haney's cousin, a brother or something, fought Ryan Garcia's, relative or something like that in the amateurs. So they bringing all this stuff back up to kind of like, I guess, set the stage for a rematch. And they talk about, oh, well, we got A side and we got B side and all this type of stuff that's coming up. I'm like, man, I don't really care about all of that. Just go ahead and say, hey, whoever's going to put up the money, y'all come up with an agreement of sorts to make this happen. And then you'll have this fight happen in the summer. Because it would be like probably the biggest fight of the summer if they're able to put it together. Like you could go ahead and have it in like, maybe July or August. Well, I don't know about August though. That could be a little bit close to what's going to be happening with Mayweather and Pacquiao. So I would say July, has something set up for July. It'd probably be another like ring event. You know how we had like, ring 6 for January 31st. You'll probably have another event coming up, what I'd say by April or something like that, maybe April or May. And then by July, another ring event featuring Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia. And you'll probably have it over there at T-Mobile Arena or something like that. I think that would be the case there, for this. So I see that happening there. Academic, you got something on this potential matchup for this rematch?
All I know is Devin Haney better make sure that they have drug testing. And if there is consistent drug testing, I think we see a different outcome. I think we see a much different outcome. I think the way the fight gonna go is gonna be different.
Yeah,
I think Devin gonna keep his hand up to where he don't get hit by the hook as much. He practiced it. I saw him practice it a little bit more. So
yeah. Because the whole thing about with Ryan Garcia and his bout against Mario Barrios, people were raising the questions there, reference Ryan Garcia, like we did earlier, saying that Ryan looked a whole lot different in this bout against Mario Barrios in comparison to his previous bout that he had against Rolando Rolly Romero, and he looked a little bit similar than what he did in his first bout against Devin Haney. So I'm like, if he, make sure that he's, staying within weight. He has to stay within weight because he's, a world champion now. And make sure that he actually follows the protocols. Because even with the whole thing with the WBC, right, they have 30-day, 14-day, and 7-day weigh-ins. And if you don't make within that weight for those days, you end up getting fined. And look like, if I'm not mistaken, Ryan Garcia missed one or two of those things and ended up having to, pitch in or something like that. But, whether he did or he didn't, he still ended up making 147 for the Barrios fight and, did what he had to do in order to win that bout. So now he could be in position to have something where he's could fight for and win another world title, which some people thought it was crazy, a couple of years ago, after, falling short against like a Tank Davis or something like that. You know what I mean? So we'll see how, that whole thing kind of sorts itself out, on that front. The other thing I wanted to, touch on, we had an announcement there for the heavyweight division, and I can't believe this, right? Because, a number of people thought that this guy, a world champion, would be able to face either a high profile opponent here for his next bout. But no. Some people thought that he would face Deontay Wilder. No. Some people thought that he would have ended up fighting the WBC interim champion there in Agit Cabello. No, that's why he ended up having Cabello defend that interim belt. Some people thought he would fight Fabio Wardley. No. Who do they have him fighting? They have him fighting a kickboxer, y'all. A kickboxer named Rico Verhoeven. Verhoeven or Verhoeven or whatever it is. And they got this thing set up to happen in Egypt, okay? And this guy, Rico Verhoeven, has had one fight, like one actual sanctioned fight in boxing. He's in the kickboxing, but he's had one professional fight in boxing, and that was on record back in 2014. So he'll be in the ring for the first time as a boxer since 2014, going up against the unified heavyweight champion of the world. That's number one. Number two, the whole thing that folks are kind of like all up in arms about is that this could potentially be for the WBC heavyweight championship. Like, wait a minute, y'all. Wait a minute. So you mean to tell me that you're going to have a guy that only has 2 professional fights be able to have a shot at the WBC heavyweight championship? Nah, that can't work. No, that can't work. Now, I don't care how much money is behind all of this, right? I don't care how much money they paying Oleksandr Usyk or this Rico Verhoeven or whatever it is, right? Like that's absolutely insane, right? Because WBC did make a statement. They said, after careful consideration, the WBC Board of Governors has ruled in favor of sanctioning WBC champion Oleksandr Usyk's voluntary title defense against legendary kickboxing champion Rico Verhoeven. This was as of 6 hours ago. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? Like, hey, like Secret Dance Move here says, complete nonsense heavyweight fight. There is no way we should be having this particular fight. It said, yeah, it's meaningless. Yeah, man, like I don't understand it. Remember, there was like, what is it? A few weeks ago, we had like some upstart company, IV Boxing or IVB Boxing, say that they would have had an announcement of sorts that there was going to be something big. They were having an event that would be in San Francisco. It would involve like over 100,000 people to be in attendance for the event. And some people thought that Oleksandr Usyk was going to be, headlining on that. And that's where the initial rumors of him facing Deontay Wilder came from. And then all of a sudden that just, fizzled away. And now here we are, fast forward. Deontay Wilder is going to be facing Derek Chisora on April 4th in the O2 Arena. And you're going to have Oleksandr Usyk in a voluntary defense against this kickboxer. What are we doing? Academic, you got anything on this before I continue on this? Because this is insane. This is insane, yo.
I'm sure that boxer saying, "Don't act like you don't know my name, JR."
So you're saying that Rico Verhoeven should be like Roy Jones Jr. Y'all must have forgot.
No, I was just being funny. But no. I mean, obviously you could see that Usyk wanted a light touch, and he masked it around legacy and stuff, which the right move for Usyk is to fight Wilder. But he wanted a light touch, and I mean, I think maybe not this light of a touch, but he does deserve, in a sense, a light touch, even though the fact that his career is probably going to end here pretty soon, that's the only issue. But with him fighting all the top guys, you kind of got to give him a light touch.
I mean, I get it on that sense, but it's kind of like a takeaway in boxing nowadays is that you can't have these one-offs in boxing without either a lot of money being involved in it because of the fighter that wants some money, or that everything has to be on some type of TV or had to be broadcast by somebody. You know what I mean? So you can't necessarily have the days of Julio Cesar Chavez having over 100 or so fights, because he can have fights in Mexico, whatever it is, or anybody like having one-offs against fighters that aren't necessarily ranked in the top 15 or the top 10 of a sanctioning body. It's like we don't necessarily have that in more guys in the top of the division. You know what I mean? It says, shout out Secret Dance Move. It says Wilder versus Cesaro is more meaningful than their Usyk fight. Yeah. And for Usyk, it's like, well, if he didn't get this, I guess his proposal to fight a, Rico Verhoeven or whatever it is, then what was he going to do with his career? It's not like he has, a set following of sorts where he could just go to, a certain venue and have fights at that venue and, continue to make money. This isn't like, the Klitschko's that were able to, fight in Germany or something like that, speaking of Germany, I talked about the WBC interim champion. His last fight was in Germany, which is his home country, and it had a good crowd, good turnout, good atmosphere, all of that type of stuff. And, once he had the stoppage win, which some people felt like it was controversial, but a stoppage win nonetheless, he was calling for the Usyk fight and saying, hey, look at this, look at this atmosphere. You had, what was it, George Warren, who's the son of Frank Warren, that was there for that fight that Agit Cabello had, and they pretty much had everything set up for it. But I guess Usyk didn't necessarily want all of that, and they just proposed this fight here against the kickboxer that has had 3-round bouts in kickboxing, 5-round bouts in kickboxing. His last bout, it looks like, was in June of last year. Man, over in and it's from the Netherlands. He's from the Netherlands, man. Listen, I'll be real with y'all. I had no idea who this guy is. I don't really follow kickboxing like that. But even with all of that, I still, don't be, following these guys. I know that he's been in glory kickboxing, as they say, through records or past records or whatever it is. But still, I'm like, come on, no one knows where this originates from as far as this actual matchup. So what is the point? There is no point. To repeat what Secret Dance Move says, this is this fight makes no sense at all. But yet, we end up having it. You know what I mean? Oh boy, I tell you, and this is, kind of where, I guess this is where the heavyweight division is at this point, where, the guy that is the clear cut, top fighter in the heavyweight division ends up having a one-off against a guy that hasn't really fought professionally in a boxing ring since 2014. And yet the World Boxing Council is able to sanction this bout as a world title bout. So so that means you're going to be actually putting this Verhoeven guy in the top 15 of the WBC. Hey, he better be registered in for VADA testing then. He better be in there for VADA testing, because, hey, you're going to have him in the top 15 for having this bout against Oleksandr Usyk for the WBC belt, then, you would have to say, hey, we got to go through the testing. And this also goes up to the other sanctioning bodies as well, right? Because it's one thing for the WBC to allow that to happen, but you got these other sanctioning bodies here. You got the WBO, not the WBO, because they already stripped them, right? You got the IBF, you got the WBA. The WBA at least has a regular world champion there in Murat Gasayev. So I'm like, what are you doing here? to kind of like say, hey, why is it that he's going to be able to have this bout against a fighter that ain't been in the boxing ring for over 12 years? That just, makes no sense. The IBF, I know, has a eliminator bout that's coming up here with that Frank Sanchez versus Richard Torres, but still, like, I think these sanctioning bodies got to do a little bit more to kind of like clean things up. You know what I mean? So yeah, man. Getting circus fights like Joshua versus Paul and now Usyk versus Rico. Now, of course, they had the situation there with the Jake Paul fight because he was supposed to fight Tank. But still, with that one, it was more like, hey, Netflix said, all right, we'll pay this amount of money to see this fight, and ended up, a little bit successful on Netflix's part, and some people were, happy that Jake Paul got his jaw broke. But outside of that, like, we don't want to see these fights again with guys that are supposedly at the top of their divisions. You know what I mean? And yeah, the Usyk Rico joint is like, yeah, there's no point in having this fight. At least on my end, I don't see it. And yeah, the WBA and IBF didn't sanction a fight, no, but with the IBF, they can't really enforce a mandatory, at least at this point. Their highest rated fighter right now is Derek Chisora, and he might end up having his last fight against Deontay Wilder. And for the WBA, like I said, Gasev is there as a WBA regular champ. So we had to see what's going on with him. You got Atama that's ranked number 1, and he has a fight that's supposed to be scheduled for March 28th. So, yeah, I don't know like how they're gonna sort this all out, but that's just gonna be some crazy work on that front. What else ahead? Oh yeah, you had Keyshawn Davis. Looks like he's calling out everybody. He's on social media. He's called out Lamar Roach. He's called out now recently Usyk Cruz. He's also called out Devin Haney, of course, after his win over Jermaine Ortiz on January 31st. Now I said here a couple weeks ago after he had the win over Jermaine Ortiz that he should kind of think about fighting either Frank Martin or Nahir Albright. Those two should be high. Those two should be like number 1 and number 2 on the list for Keyshawn Davis. Now, a fight with Usyk Cruz, I wouldn't mind it. But I just think that, there's a lot that could be done within 140 pounds. Yes, Usyk Cruz currently is the WBC interim champion at 140 pounds. But I feel like Usyk Cruz should run it back with Lamont Roach Jr. And yeah, Keyshawn did say that he would like a fight with Lamont Roach Jr., but I don't know. It just looks like an entire mess there of sorts with Keyshawn Davis. But, he is like one of the fighters that has gained a lot of interest over the past year and a half. A lot of people are following him, through social media. He does have his channel there on YouTube as well. But we just, want to see what could be next here for Keyshawn Davis. And, while a lot of these fights could be really interesting for him, I want to see like he has a set direction on who he wants to end up fighting next. Box Academic, do you have like any suggestions there for Keyshawn Davis, at least at 140?
So not at the top of my head, but it would be nice to see him fight like a live fighter, like a fighter that he's not like super overmatched above, someone that he's not as unevenly matched with. And so there are a few guys out, but I don't have any thoughts.
Gotcha. Because you don't want to necessarily see him in like a fight where he could be a significant favorite. I mean,
that's the only thing I don't. I just want to see him in a fight to where at least on paper it's closer to 50-50. They ain't got to be 50-50, but closer to it.
Closer to it, yeah. I feel you. Now, they got him like listed at number 1 in the WBO, but we all know the WBO champion is Shakur Stevenson, and he ain't fighting Shakur Stevenson. All right, got him number 4 in the IBF, and Richard Hitchens is currently the champ there, but Hitchens, of course, didn't have his fight against Duarte, and he could likely move up and weight, so that belt could be vacant. He's also rated in the WBA, but they got him as low as number 14 in the WBA, which that's kind of wild there. Let me see. I have to check it there. Well, actually, they took him out of the WBA rankings there for 140 because I don't see him there in the updated rankings. So that's what they got for him so far, man. I mean, but I would like there are a number of interesting matchups out there for Keyshawn Davis, whether it's like I said, Frank Martin, whether it's a rematch with Nahir Albright, whether it's Isaac Cruz or Lamont Rose Jr. But at the end of the day, we want to at least see him in one of those high profile fights. He was in a big stage there, against Jermaine Ortiz, and was able to get a stoppage win. But now it's like, okay, what could be next for him? Remember, he was at one point the WBO lightweight champion, won the WBO lightweight title, wasn't able to defend it once, but still, has all that momentum, hasn't lost a bout yet in the professional ranks. So we, a lot of people want to see what would be next here for Keyshawn Davis. And I think that if he's able to, face one of those guys that I named and will be able to get the win, then he will be in a good position there. I'm not even mentioning him against one of the world champions there at 140. I'm saying one guy that could be, there as a top contender of sorts in the 140-pound division before, stepping up to fight for a world title out there at 140. Not, bouncing up and down 140 and 147. You just had your first fight of 140 pounds. And like I was mentioning there, calling out Devin Haney, it's like you're already, looking to fight at 147. Why? You just got here at 140. I mean, I don't understand it, but we'll see, what he does here, in the near future. But I would like to see if he could establish himself there at 140 pounds, make some fights happen at 140 and, do some work. You know what I mean? He don't necessarily have to be at 147 like ASAP. No. There's a lot of talented fighters there at 140 that you could face and, be able to generate a good amount of buzz for us. So why not just go ahead and do that? But, that remains to be seen what happens there for Keyshawn Davis on that. So, those are most of the major topics that I had there, for this. We did have the thing for Pro Box that was on Friday. We did speak with Edward Kid Vasquez before he had his bout that was on Pro Box TV there over in Arlington, Texas. So, Edward Kid Vasquez was able to, get a stoppage win there on that. Was able to, wear down Grimaldi Machuca there within 5 rounds. So that was, top performance by him there. Like you said, he wants to, compete, whether it's at 130 or 126. Of course, he had, challenge for a world title at 130, challenge for a world title at 126. So we want to see if he's going to be able to get back in the mix either at featherweight or super featherweight here. But he was able to get a win on this one. And, we also did have the fight card for the Manny Pacquiao Promotions joint that was headlined by Elijah Pierce and Lorenzo Parra, where Lorenzo Parra was able to, crack Elijah Pierce in the second round and get a TKO victory. There, Ricky Gonzalez, raved the bout pretty much before Elijah Pierce hit the canvas. No count, no nothing. Pretty much saw Elijah Pierce looked like he was out on his feet before he even hit the canvas and waved the bout. So that means that Lorenzo Parra is the WBO International Featherweight Champion. And that was huge because Elijah Pierce before this fight was rated at number 2 in the WBO. The guy that was rated at number 1 is now the WBA champion in Brandon Figueroa. So, we were saying, like, if Elijah Pierce would have won this fight, he would have been right there next in line and could probably challenge for the WBO featherweight title. But him getting knocked out, that is a huge setback. And yes, he did say immediately after the fight that he wanted a rematch with Lorenzo Parra, but I don't know. I'm being real with y'all. I don't know. Because if I'm not mistaken, isn't Lorenzo Parra there under Manny Pacquiao Promotions? I'd have to check. I would have to check, because if he is, then they would probably, maneuver him to at least try to go after, more higher rated contender of sorts instead of having a rematch with Elijah Pierce. But I'll have to see, and check or whatever it is. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, shout out to L Dub in the building. Here checking in. But yeah, this was a huge setback here for Elijah Pierce. Of course, he wanted to contend in the 122-pound division, wasn't able to do that. Then had a couple of bouts here, 126. Was able to become the international featherweight champion, but here had the bout against Lorenzo Parra, and like even in the first round, he was getting caught with some shots, and I'm like, man, this ain't looking good. And then getting into the corner, getting caught in the corner like that, it ended up being like one of those, combination knockdowns, and ended up being a knockout because, like I said, the referee stepped in before, Pierce hit the canvas and everything like that. So that's what you had on that one. Carmel Moulton was on that card, was able to get a stoppage. I don't know I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I don't know what the direction is for Carmel Moulton at this point. Of course, he had like a whole lot of buzz, with his pro debut. That was back in September of 2023. That was part of that Canelo versus Charlo card, right? But from then until now, what has this been, like 9 or 10 fights for Carmel Moulton? He's kind of fluctuated up and down between like 135 and 140. They don't know like where he's going to kind of like establish himself, at least for the time being, here until we could see what's next for him. But that was also on that card. We had Bryce Mills, that's from New York, was able to get a stoppage win on this fight card. Supposed to have Emmanuel Pacquiao Jr. or Manny Pacquiao Jr. on the card, but he ended up getting scrapped out of that card too. So, but that's mainly what I had here. There isn't that much action that's upcoming outside of the Zuffa boxing card for March 8th. That's what I got. Academic, you had something that you want to add?
I don't recall you talking about the greatness in the flesh, the GWOAT, sir.
When you said the greatness, I knew where it was going to go. I knew it. I absolutely knew it.
Her greatness. I don't recall you talking about her greatness.
Okay. Well, okay, I'll talk about it there. L Dub, shout out L Dub. He says that Bryce Mills called out Emiliano after the fight. Ooh, that would be an interesting bout. I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind that fight. Okay. The greatness of Carissa Shields. Oh man. Okay. It's interesting that you say that because I've tried hard to avoid talking about that fight.
Oh dang, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I tried hard to avoid talking about that fight because I didn't I'll just be honest with folks, I didn't like how it was handled. I didn't like how it was promoted. I didn't like how it was presented. I didn't like how it ended up.
On Sunday night too.
Yeah, on a Sunday night, but I mean, Clarissa Shields has had events on a Sunday night before,
Yeah. But they could have had it a little earlier.
Yeah. But it's something where I guess they were still able to, get a good crowd or whatever it is, at least at in Detroit, right? But the way that this was promoted, and I kind of went through this story here a few times, but going from the back when Clarissa Shields had her first fight, or not her first fight, but her last bout that she had that was over in that same venue. It was all built to have the rematch between Shields and Franchon Cruz. But then Shields said immediately after the fight that she was a free agent. Now, if you're somebody that has been waiting for a long time to have a rematch with a fighter that gave you your first loss, and you do what it takes in order for you to set up the rematch or to make things happen for the rematch to take place, then you're there in attendance watching Clarissa Shields fight. And then after Shields has her fight and it's all said and done, and Shields goes on the mic and then says that she is a free agent while you signed with the same promotional company that Clarissa Shields was on. So you kind of see where Franchon Cruz was at that particular point. Like, what? So you have all that happen. Then, okay, months later, yeah, you did have Clarissa Shields talk about the new deal and everything like that, signing back with, Salida Promotions. Then you fast forward and you have the fight officially, be signed and things like that. When it's first, promoted and things like that, it's almost like they treated Franchon Cruz like she was just another opponent. You had the whole thing that happened with the newscaster out in Detroit that pretty much was saying who is Franchon Cruz almost to a certain extent. So for Franchon at that point, it's why is there so much disrespect going on, for me leading into this bout where I've done all this work. I've become your undisputed super middleweight champion before. I became unified super middleweight champion. Again, I'm currently a unified super middleweight champ. But it's it almost seems like it's all about Clarissa Shields and not really about, Franchon. And then you fast forward into fight week, same type of thing going on. And then the whole thing that happened in the weigh-in pretty much made things 100 times worse. At least to me it did. Because having that fight go on there at the weigh-in, that was just insane. And then you had the fight that that went on and took and happened, and I'm
can I say?
Yeah, go ahead. You could go ahead because I had something as far as the actual fight. But yeah. Go ahead, academic.
So I'm gonna interject and say my own comments. I hear what you're saying about her being disrespected and it being all about Clarissa Shields. But when the fight actually happened, I mean, it ain't like we didn't already know this, but the reason why Clarissa Shields don't get credit and the reason why people were down in her is because it's such a talent differential. And that's just what it is. Outside the super top women, it's such a talent differential, at least as it relates to Clarissa Shields. Okay. And unfortunately, it is what it is. It's a talent differential. Clarissa won't get the crown that she probably thinks and wants to get unless she fight Jimenez, Jesus, whatever her name is.
That's crazy. You crazy.
I'm just saying, unless she fights somebody like that.
I know, but yeah, I get it, but there actually should be an opponent lined up, for Clarissa Shields, but I'll get into that a little bit later. But go ahead, continue.
No, I'm done. I don't want to get canceled.
Okay,
I'm done.
Okay. All right, so I'll go to this thing in reference to the fight because remember, going from the previous week, the last podcast, the fight was basically going on by the time I was, concluding the thing there for the last podcast. And even then, I was like, I really wanted to be like hands off of it. And I was able to catch like the last 5 rounds of the fight, and I didn't really see that much that said that there was going to be real competitive fight. And for Franchon, from what I was seeing there from Franchon, I didn't like it. And if you're going into this bout and this is like the biggest fight of your career, I expected more. And there were a couple of things that I didn't know going into this bout that I ended up finding out after the bout took place. Okay. Seeing her husband in the corner as a head trainer, I mean, that's all well and good, but some people know who used to be in her corner, okay, in the past. Well-known trainer, one of the most well-known trainers in boxing. And, for this one in particular, or this fight in particular, that didn't happen. That's why, not only that trainer, but usually the person that's the chief second, neither of them were over in Detroit that weekend. They were actually in town, and the problem is that when you are going up to face your rival that was basically there in the amateurs, also in the pros, and it's going to be your first fight that's in a higher weight class, you gotta be on your P's and Q's. And it really didn't look like she was on her P's and Q's on that. Shout out to my bro Cat Quest in the building. What's going on here, man? It said that she ain't active enough. Man, listen.
It ain't even about being active. It's about her fighting style. Unfortunately, is more of a choppy, adding SL in front of the CH. It's that word too. And what else did we expect? No offense to her, because against other people, that style probably does work against other people. She mauls people, she does whatever. But against Clarissa, it's such a talent differential. Sorry for cutting you.
No problem, no problem. Shout L Dub says that Fairchild had Buddy McGirt. She had also somebody else too that was basically within her area, and it just didn't quite work out. Okay, I'll just put it that way. But going with what Academic was talking about, like the style that she has and everything, that it just isn't necessarily work all too well or too hot. Yes, she was able to get the win over Shadeja Green back in 2023, but to Cap Quest's point, after 2023, her next bout wasn't until 2025. And that was when she ended up signing with Salida Promotions and had that, bout where she defended 2 other super middleweight titles there, right? And she fought an opponent that had 5 professional bouts and ended up winning that bout by majority decision. Okay. And that can't work if you're, going up against the fighters that are, at the top level or whatever it is. If you're going to have Clarissa Shields at the top level, then you can't have bouts where you're close against opponents that have like five professional bouts on their record. Like, you're supposed to be, the one that's a veteran in the game. You know what I mean? And so if you're having like these type of performances, like, you're gonna have to step it up to a completely different level if you're looking to compete there against Clarissa Shields, and it just didn't look like that. When I saw Franchon there in the ring, it looked like she shouldn't have like basically went up to heavyweight, because it wasn't like she, as they say, they bulk up to a higher weight class. It didn't really look like that to me. You've seen her like be not really what I would say, like her conditioning looked like it was in question, and to be honest with you, what Clarissa Shields was doing in the ring, from what I saw, that fight could have been stopped if Clarissa Shields was like really putting punches together like that. She could have stopped Franchon, but I just didn't like it. They had some words after the fight. I ain't really listened to what they were saying after the fight. Maybe their relationship that they had going into this bout probably changed after this bout, but yeah, I just wasn't, like I said, academic. I really wasn't much of a fan of the fight. For Shields after this, I don't know what's going to be next for her, because I'm not very confident that it will be Shadasia Green next. I think Shadasia Green is going to be fighting in April. That's going to be her next bout. And then after that, I'll see if she ends up fighting Clarissa Shields, but I just don't think that that's going to be the case. I think that they're going to have like another, well, not another, but I think they're going to have a large type of event for Clarissa Shields, maybe against, finally had that bout against Cyborg or something like that. But as far as like Shields versus Shadasia Green next, I don't see it. At least I don't see it for now. So that's what I have.
To be honest, even with her fighting Cyborg, her fighting anybody else in the division, like it ain't like we missing much. It ain't like it's gonna be, too much different. Unless Cyborg got something going on that I'm not familiar with. And who knows? But
yeah, the thing is, it would be like an event. It wouldn't be like something where like Cyborg is having the fights that she could have within whatever division she's in. You know what I mean? Because right now, with Clarissa Shields, she's there as what they say, the undisputed heavyweight champion. And you kind of like bring this up. That division has what, a total of 50 fighters on the record that are in the heavyweight division that it shows. So it's like either you're gonna have bouts against fighters that may not have that much experience in the heavyweight division while being a heavyweight, or you're going to be bringing fighters up from lower weight classes. So yeah, I just think it's going to be something here where it's they just come up with fights that I guess would be events, or try to make it big events there for Clarissa Shields. Otherwise, you'll probably be competing in PFL or something like that. But outside of that, I really don't see anything where I could say, hey, all right, this could be next for Clarissa Shields. No, all I see is like maybe a Shadasia Green, or I don't know, maybe a rematch with Savannah Marshall or something. But outside of that, I just don't see much from that. That's why I really didn't want to go into that particular topic there, man. But yeah, what else that's up? Like I said, we have the fights on March. That's on the March schedule. He's supposed to have the thing there for Zuffa Boxing coming up next Sunday. So we have that. That's on the slate. Of course, Sebastian Pandora versus Keith Thurman, March 28th. That's in Las Vegas. So
I'll be in the building.
Okay. All right. So you did see what was going on there with the undercard, at least so far. We got that Frank Sanchez versus Richard Torres fight. It's an IBF heavyweight eliminator. That's going to be a really good scrap there. I'm looking forward to seeing that on there. You're going to have Elijah Garcia in there going up against Kevin Newman II. That's going to be an interesting bout. You got Yoeli Hernandez there. Oh man, that's a really, really good middleweight. I think that he probably should be the highest rated contender out there in the middleweight division. But he's going to be going up against Terrell Gausha on that pay-per-view card. So we do have that. That's going to be, on the schedule there for March 28th. Outside of that, we talked about, what's on the schedule for April 4th with the Chisora versus Wilder, April 11th with the Fury there versus Makhmudov, and oh man, on the co-feature of Fury versus Makhmudov, Conor Benn versus Regis Prograis, and how that was an absolute mess of PR handled by Zuffa and by the folks at TKO. That was an absolute fumble because you had the whole little buzz about Conor Benn supposedly leaving Matchroom when, well, one, his Matchroom deal was basically done, and then two, like, who would say that Conor Benn would be leaving Matchroom to join Zuffa Boxing? I don't understand, what would go on with that. But yeah, I'm unsure about that. Real quick though, before I get back into that, Cap Quest asked if Jahad Tucker won his fight. He fought against Sona Akale in Huntington, and he said that he won by technical knockout in the 6th round. That was on Rockin' Fights 53, Joe DeGuardia promotions there. I thought they would have had that in some type of like on YouTube or something, like live on YouTube or whatever it is, but they didn't. But yeah, Jahad Tucker ended up winning by TKO, and they were saying that Jahad Tucker would have been an opponent for Yoeli Hernandez, and I'm just be honest, I'm thankful that he wasn't an opponent for Yoeli Hernandez. I'm just saying. But yeah, back to the whole Conor Benn debacle. You have your 2 fights. Conor Benn has his 2 fights with Chris Eubank Jr. Of course, generated a lot of interest, good amount of money over there in the UK. He was able to win the last bout that they had between the two. Okay. You went through what you went through under Matchroom, because remember, you were suspended for some time over in the UK because of the whole little, I guess, eggs or whatever it is, right? Matchroom was able to sort you to have fights over in the US while you were suspended over in the UK. Then you were able to have 2 of the biggest fights over in the UK with those bouts against Chris Eubank Jr. And now you say, okay, we get this offer for, 8 figures to have a fight of sorts there, and it's not under Matchroom. And you don't contact Matchroom. You don't say, hey, I got this over here. They're offering me this over here. Would you be able to match it or surpass it or whatever? Nah, he just went ahead and, went for it. And so you had, of course, Eddie Hearn talking a lot about it, and the Boxing World talking a lot about it. And then you see that it says, Conor Benn is signed to Zuffa Boxing. What? Zuffa Boxing? Conor Benn? For what? So when that was out there in the public, then that really got people all in the tizzy, including those on the TKO group, which actually is they're over Zuffa Boxing. So when the shareholders talked to the TKO group CEO, he was like, wait, hold on. Y'all slow down with all of these, reports and all the stuff that's going out. Conor Benn, we have Conor Benn for at least a fight, at least one fight. Okay. We're not confirming nor denying that he got 15 million. That's what he said. Those were his words. That's what he said. We ain't confirming or denying that he's got 15 million. But what we will say is that whatever he's getting is not, basically coming from TKO. It's coming from Selah and Turkey LLC. So he had to put that out there, for the shareholders and everything like that. That was part one. And then part two was because of all of the buzz and all this stuff that was going on back and forth with Eddie Hearn and Zuffa Boxing and TKO and Conor Benn, that had forced them to basically say that Conor Benn is on that card for Fury Makhmudov, and he's going to be facing Regis Prograis. Again, no, Regis Prograis. Yeah, he was a former champion there at 140 pounds, but still, at the end of the day, Regis Prograis. So you mean to tell me that you're basically coming down to welterweight, Conor Benn, and you're facing Regis Prograis for 8 figures? Crazy work. It's absolutely crazy work. By the way, y'all, this is the same Conor Benn that has not fought for a world title yet. At least Ryan Garcia is able to fight for and now win a world title. But Conor Benn has not been able to win a world title yet. But yet he's able to be in a position to have these lucrative fights. And here is another one against Regis Prograis for 8 figures. Crazy. Absolutely insane. And I don't know how that's going to turn out. Hey, at least it's on Netflix, but I don't know who's going to be interested in a fight between Conor Benn and Regis Prograis on Netflix.
If he loses, it tells us a lot about him and Chris Eubank as well.
Yeah, I would say a lot about Chris Eubank. But, Chris Eubank had also been very vocal towards Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn, after that announcement was put out there, because of how a few things were handled while those 2 fights were going on. So you know what though? I think this is a one-off with Conor Benn and Regis Prograis. I do think this is a one-off. Now, yeah, you did have the TKO group president say something about, yeah, maybe we had Conor Benn, fighting, more than one time under us. But I think that if you had this bout against Regis Prograis, this could set the stage for maybe another fight between Conor Benn and Chris Eubank. I wouldn't be surprised if that would be it, because listen, it's one thing for Conor Benn to not, be fighting for, world titles or anything like that. But listen, if you got it to the point where you could fight guys and not have a world title on the line and still generate a good amount of money, then yeah, you could just go ahead and still have that, just still fight like that. You know what I mean? Now, for Chris Eubank, he, hasn't really fought for a major world title yet. He has not fought for a major world title yet. IBO, hey, sometimes they have the rankings. That's pretty good, but the IBO is not recognized as a major sanctioning body. So with that being said, Chris Eubank, he hasn't really been like a major world champion. Now he probably fought for the WBA belt maybe one time or whatever, but I don't remember that. But hey, as far as like the WBA, WBC, IBF, WBO, he ain't really, win any of those. So if you could have another fight with Conor Benn and be able to get more money off of that, hey, more power to you. But to be very vocal about what Conor Benn is doing here in this sense, I think it's something to where they're saying that, hey, don't be surprised if they're, kind of like planting the seeds for another fight between those two. Because, I mean, if you're going to have, Conor Benn fighting Regis Prograis of all people, then what's the point? It's not like Regis Prograis is a contender of sorts in the welterweight division or any type of division whatsoever. Like, you had Conor Benn that's supposed to be ranked in the welterweight division, but where in the world is Regis Prograis in the welterweight division? Like, nowhere to be found. So what that's why I say, what's the point? So I don't get it, but at least for Conor Benn, he's able to be in this position to, fight on Netflix here for April 11th. But yeah, I'm not necessarily a fan of the fight. Just being honest with y'all, not a fan of the fight. All right. So, that's why I got here on this, edition of the Boxing Source podcast. Boxing Academic, you got anything else to add here?
No, nothing else.
All right. Gotcha. So, yeah, that's what we got here, for this edition. Thanks for everyone that's been able to listen here live on this podcast here. Y'all hit the like button if you're watching live here, whether it's YouTube, Rumble, or whatever it is. Hit the share button. We will be back at it with the midweek report. Hopefully we'll set up a couple of interviews here on the schedule that'll be on the channel, so that you'll be able to catch up with a few either a few fighters, a few traders, or something like that. But also, I will have an announcement of sorts on social media in reference to updating the project for the trading cards. So I'm going to have an update here on social media this week in reference to the trading cards, just a little bit closer to what I'm looking to do there with that particular project. So y'all be on the lookout for all of that. Y'all check out, of course, the website, theboxingsource.net. There, and also just follow us on social media: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We're on TikTok as well. So that's what we got here on this edition. And until next time, folks, I will catch y'all later. Peace out.